All right, we're beginning Unit 1. All right, this unit deals with the early development of American democracy. So today's learning objective. After completing this lesson, students should be able to define the 13 colonies. All right, you also should be able to explain what motivated settlers to create the 13 colonies. On this slide, we have some symbols that pay homage to the 13 colonies. At the top right-hand corner, you'll see what is known as the Great Seal of the United States. You'll see that the number 13 is represented in many different ways. For example, there's 13 arrows in the eagle's hand. There's 13 stars above his head. There are 13 stripes on his chest on that flag. There's also 13 olive leaves, all right? Likewise, on our own American flag, all right, you'll notice there's 13 stripes. A lot of this is paying homage um, to the 13 colonies. Likewise, we see the Betsy Ross flag to the left in the bigger picture. This is actually um, the original flag of the 13 colonies. All right. So what were the 13 colonies? Well, they were a group of British colonies founded on the east coast of North America throughout the 17th and 18th century. And really, they're significant because really they mark the beginning of America's history. All right, we pretty much trace the beginning or origin of our national history to the 13 colonies. All right, the political foundation of the 13 colonies originated from English ideas. All right, and they were transplanted in North America by English settlers. All right, so much of our history, we trace our history to the 13 colonies, but a lot of the ideas that were sort of foundational to our society really came from England. All right, many of the political traditions established by the 13 colonies are still present with us today. In many ways, the 13 colonies represent the beginning point from which we understand modern American democracy. But what motivated these English settlers to leave their homeland in England to make this dangerous journey across the Atlantic Ocean and to colonize an unfamiliar territory with unknown dangers? Well, there's essentially four reasons that we're going to break down today. Some, such as the Puritans, were seeking religious freedom. Others were attempting to escape political turmoil that had overwhelmed civil society throughout England. Others were seeking better economic opportunities than those available in England. And finally, a few even came to escape bad marriages and jail terms. So let's analyze the first reason of why English settlers came to America. There's essentially two historical events that influenced the flow of settlers to the New World, and these were the Protestant and English Reformation. So what's the Protestant Reformation? Really, this was a conflict with the Catholic Church over rituals and practices that many deemed corrupt. One practice that came under great scrutiny was the selling of indulgences, which Catholic priests promised would reduce the amount of punishment one would receive or undergo for committing a sin. So if you committed a sin, you would just go to a priest, buy an indulgence, and the future punishment that you would receive for committing that sin, it would be reduced just by buying this indulgence. All right. These corrupt practices by the Catholic Church prompted the Protestant Reformation in 1517, resulting in Martin Luther and other reformers splitting away from the Catholic Church. Their message was simple: faith alone, not indulgences nor Catholic rituals, could assure salvation of the soul. In many ways, these reformers were protesting against the corruption of the Catholic Church. This is where the word Protestant come from. Essentially, they were protesters. All right, they were protesting corrupt Catholic practices. The second event we're going to look at is the English Reformation. English Reformation formed out of a dispute between King Henry VIII and the Pope. King Henry VIII asked the Pope to annul his marriage, but the Pope refused, since essentially divorce was prohibited by the Catholic Church. This sort of infuriated King Henry VIII, and he broke away from the Catholic Church and established the Church of England. All right. With the creation of the Church of England, the king replaced the Pope as the head of the church, which really greatly reduced the control the Catholic Church could exercise over Christians throughout England. So once the Church of England was created, now the king or the queen was the head of the church, no longer the Pope. So you might be asking yourself, why are the English and Protestant Reformation significant for understanding why English settlers would colonize America? Following the Protestant and English Reformation, England's national identity had become closely affiliated with Protestantism. To be a good Englishman or woman was to be Protestant. As one author noted, a loyal English subject in the late 16th century loved the Queen, supported the Church of England, and hated Catholics. All right. At this point, many Englishmen had turned against the Catholic Church. With the diminishing influence of Catholicism came a fierce campaign to purge the Church of England of any likeness with Catholicism. Members of the Church of England who wanted to purge it of Catholic traditions were known as Puritans. The Puritans felt that the Church of England still held too much in common with Catholic rituals and practices, particularly bishops. Really, bishops came from was a tradition from the Catholic Church, and really these Puritans didn't want to really have bishops to be part of the Church of England. All right, the demands of the Puritans were simple. They wanted a pure form of worship based upon Scripture. Remember, things like indulgences, they really weren't based upon Scripture. And really their motto was that if the Church of England contained unscriptural Catholic elements, then they had to be eliminated. And really that was the whole argument of Puritans, all right? Puritans were unsatisfied with the progress the Church of England had made in ridding itself of Catholic traditions. And their desire to practice a more pure form of worship free of Catholicism led many to look to the New World as a place where they could put their religious beliefs into practice. All right, so really from 1630 to 1640, Puritans migrated to America and established a new Puritan colony in Massachusetts Bay. This colony became later known as the New England Colony. This is something we'll study and look more in depth in the next couple of lessons. And really, they anticipated that this New England colony would become a city on a hill for pure religious, for pure worship based upon Scripture. The second reason why English settlers came to the New World was political turmoil. All right, during the 17th century, English monarchs and Parliament found themselves in constant political conflict with one another. Parliament fiercely supported Protestantism. All right, many of these members of Parliament were Puritans. While most monarchs supported Protestant causes, accusations that the king was a Catholic sympathizer or not on board with Puritan initiatives to purge institutions of Catholicism really were lingering in the background. There's always these accusations that the king, that he really wasn't gonna, that he was always gonna bring Catholic influences back into England. All right. In the 1640s, tension between Parliament and the monarchy came to a head once Charles I, who was the reigning monarch at the time, took up arms against Parliament in what developed into an English Civil War. All right, needless to say, Parliament emerged victorious and Charles I lost his head. Such political events determined in large measure the direction and flow of migration to America, as many Englishmen viewed the New World as a safe haven from political turmoil. So really, there's an English Civil War going on in England. And really, this motivated many English settlers to come to the New World. The third reason is economic opportunities. During the 1500s, England's population was growing rapidly. Many English leaders concluded that colonies in America were necessary to provide land and employment for England's growing population. Likewise, many among those who were facing economic inequality dreamed of owning land and improving their social position. Many started to view the New World as a place where settlers could escape the economic inequalities throughout England. Essentially, these English settlers viewed the New World as really receiving a new shot in life. All right. Some people's situations were so desperate that they sold themselves as indentured servants. That's an individual who agrees to work for a colonist for many years in exchange for transportation to the colonies, food, clothing, and shelter. So once their required time was fulfilled, they would be released as indentured servants. And really, they did this in hopes of escaping poverty and gaining some level of prosperity. After the supply of indentured servants had run dry, this is when colonists turned to slavery as an option for securing cheaper labor. So what's the conclusion of this lesson? What are we trying to conclude here? Well, English settlers were motivated to colonize the New World for a variety of reasons, all of which would shape the distinct regional identities that would take root in America. For example, let's just think about this. We know that Puritans came to the New World, particularly they settled in the New England area, which is Massachusetts, Connecticut, those areas. And really, that shaped their regional identity. It was very much a religious community that developed in that area. So, in many ways, this demonstrates the early presence of democratic ideals, since the ideas, concerns, and traditions of the people started to shape their regional identities. That's to say that what the people were dictated the society they created, rather than having sort of a king who just sort of ruled indifferently and really wasn't concerned with who the people were. All right, so the major point is that that this sort of demonstrates that these communities are based on the people, what the people want on some level, which is in many ways democratic. So let's just review this one more time. After completing this lesson, students should be able to define the 13 colonies. We suggested today that really the 13 colonies were a group of British colonies that developed on the east coast of the United States um, from the 17th and 18th century. Likewise, we explained what motivated settlers to create the 13 colonies. These were religious reasons, particularly the Puritans wanted religious freedom to create a place where they could practice their religious beliefs without the influences of Catholicism. Likewise, we said that some of them were trying to escape political turmoil. Particularly, there was an English Civil War going on, and many viewed it as a volatile situation, and they wanted to escape that, and they did that sort of by coming to the New World. The third reason that we talked about was better economic opportunity. England's population was growing, and really there wasn't a lot of jobs. So many people came to the New World to better themselves economically. All right, and we also covered that fourth reason shortly, or very briefly at the beginning, where we said that some people were just trying to escape bad marriages um, and prison terms. All right.